Oxygen not included is a stretch of projects tied together by urgency to keep your colony alive. But once you've secured your colony's survival, you can afford to set your own goals, limited only by your creativity and ingenuity. If you haven't yet reached this stage, this video series is for you. Of course, everyone will have different ways of playing. There's rarely a one-size-fits-all solution, and this 3-part series of progression guides doesn't aim to be one. But I hope that it becomes a blueprint for players that are lost in this game, providing much needed direction on what to do and in what order at every stage of the game, in a world that doesn't explain you anything. Also, I want to show you how a real late game base could look and the compromises that had to be made to reach it. So, let's set the stage. This is Terra, the standard asteroid, or Terrania if you're playing the vanilla game. Depending on world traits and whether you've enabled DLC biomes or not, your world might look slightly differently, but the core biomes and materials should all be accessible from the start. This is also the classic start of Spaced Out DLC, which means that there will be other planets that we can colonize, but the map will look as close to the base game as possible. I explained this and more about world gen and starting options in this video here, and I recommend you watch it, even if you've played the game excessively before. I spent over 1,000 hours in the game before I finally went out and learned about these things, and I'm glad that I did. Okay, now once you have starting options sorted out, you have to choose your duplicants. So you can either pick a dupe that has one dedicated interest which will make your dupe more powerful in the early game, or a dupe with a wider skill set which will have lower morale requirements later in the game. The choice is up to you, but the most needed skills for the early game are building, digging, and researching, plus a bit of operating and supplying. I prefer to pick a digger that also has supplying or building skills, a builder that also has operating skills, and a researcher that also has suit wearing or rocketry skill, because my researchers will eventually go to space, use telescopes, etc. Or go with farming as the second interest if you want to do botanical analysis eventually. It's a bit of thinking ahead. For future-proofing your other dupes, as I mentioned, you could find dupes that combine operating and building skills, as well as supplying and building skills. A builder pairs well with digging and supplying, which increases the speed at which you transform the world. But to be effective at digging, you have to do the following. When your dupes are digging vertically, it's best to do so in an S pattern. They will be much faster this way, even if you do decide you need to build ladders later. When digging sideways, the method on the left is much faster. You can reach this line of tiles from below and dig it out once you're done with the top portion. But if you go with the method on the right because you need the ladders, then remember that your dupes can reach 4 tiles up and 3 tiles down when standing on them. When starting the game, make sure to prioritize tasks for skilled dupes and lower the priority for those that you don't intend to use for those tasks. Here, you'd either raise researching priority for your researcher or lower it for everyone else. It's important to do so if you have dupes with negative skill points because they'll take forever to complete their tasks. But don't overdo it. In the example with digging, if you have a dupe with higher supply priority than the digger and another with a higher build priority than the digger, you can encounter a problem where your digger digs out one tile, and then, since his build and supply priorities are low, he is forced to idle as he waits for the supplier and the builder to build a ladder for him. This will waste too much of your precious time, so even if you don't have a dupe interested in both digging and building, it's fine to let your digger do the building, even without teaching him the building skills. And I would also enable proximity already now, as I have never had problems with doing so, but keep an eye on your dupes and adjust if your experience differs. Now, in short, every task starts with priority 30. If you edit the priorities for your dupes, you can make it 10, 20, 40 or 50. This means that if I order a ladder and one of my dupes, Peanut, has priority 40 for building and the other, Butter, has the default 30, Peanut will take over the task. But if there's 2 ladders scheduled and Butter is idling, Butter will take on the second task. However, if I set Butter's dig priority to 40 and schedule digging tasks as well, then Butter will let Peanut do all the building, but he himself will take all of the digging, unless any of the dupes with lower digging priority are idling. The priorities of each individual task that you assign go from 1 to 9 and only affect the order in which Butter does the digging. It will generally not affect which dupe gets assigned. Because, well, Peanut's priority 39 is still less than Butter's. And so if you ever have multiple emergency digs and need all hands on deck, setting those digs at 9 won't help bring in Peanut, which is busy doing building errands. That's when you use the emergency priority, which sets it to 300 and calls up even those with low priority. You can always check the Errands tab to see the order of tasks, and then to find why the most qualified dupe is not doing it. Just click on the dupe and see what is it that they consider more urgent than your orders. Because sometimes it might not be an actual issue with priorities, the dupe might just be prepping for sleep. Speaking of schedule, it is useful to get some night owls and early birds for your colony as they receive a boost for the tasks they do at certain times of the day. This helps you maintain your colony 24/7, reduces the amount of toilets that are needed all at once, and gives you productivity boost at no cost whatsoever. But be careful not to pick every duplicate that you're given in the printing pod. It's fine to reject them as their upkeep can quickly spiral out of control. Yes, you will experience a shortage of hands in the early hours of the game, but think of it this way. Adding another pair of hands adds another mouth and nose too. Do you produce enough food and oxygen for them? If not, hold on. In this game it's better to fix things or make them self-sustaining rather than throw more hands at the problem. For example, let's say you have an outhouse and your dupes start making a mess because the outhouse wasn't cleaned in time. Does it mean you need to have another dupe for the cleaning duty or maybe build another outhouse? Maybe there's a better solution. There is. Have your researcher work on sanitation and distillation and you'll be able to build a toilet, sink and water sieve. Pipe the outputs of the toilet and sink into the water sieve and pipe the outputs of the water sieve into the inputs of the toilet and sink with a bypass for the excess clean water. With this setup, you will never need to clean the toilet, look for clean water, or pipe that water through half your base. In fact, you will be producing extra. One toilet is enough for so many dupes you'd be surprised, especially if you use the Night Owl trait or simply have more than one schedule. Just move their schedules a bit in the Schedule tab so they don't go all at the same time. Problem solved. These icons are just there for your night owls and early birds. There is no bonus or penalty for having your other dupes sleep at any other time than nighttime. Additionally, it's a good idea to reduce sleep to just 2 bars once you build cots for your dupes, as that's enough to recover their stamina. At the start, digging is your main priority. You have to discover as much as you can. Your main goal here is to identify vents and geysers on the map. These will be your sources of long-term sustainability. You will build your base around them and will structure your gameplay around what you have available. When looking for them, you don't have to destroy all the nature. You can find them by checking for neutronium tiles in the overlays. Also, to the side of it, you'll have a single dirt tile with 2203 kilograms, which is easy to spot in material overlay. And leave the rest of the world be unless you need the space or resources. If you accidentally unlock a vent or a geyser, it's best to lock it with insulated tiles for the time being. And if you see a biome that you don't really have a use for, you may leave it be. Who knows, maybe you'll use it as a nature reserve later on, or it will just fit well into the layout of your base. I've played before, remolding the world around me to my designs, but I have found it's more fun the other way around, to comply with the natural features of the world. Plus, there's a few things you might not wish to deal with at the start. One such thing is sublimators, like slime and bleach stone. You can put them in a pool of water so they don't off-gas polluted oxygen and chlorine respectively, but they will inevitably leak some of that unless they fall directly into water as you mine them. Oxylite is always safe to dig out as it will not cause overpressure, but make sure it doesn't open up an undesired area once its reserves are exhausted. You can always lock it within tiles to preserve it for later. Chlorine and slime lung are not something you want to deal with in early game, so locking those up is also a wise solution. Either don't touch those areas at all for now, or build doors or tiles immediately so they don't seep into your base. You could also let chlorine and polluted oxygen mix outside of your base so that chlorine kills off all the slime lung eventually. Other than that, don't worry about mixing gases. They will all settle at their respective levels and won't bother you unless you have a really small base, which is why you should dig out as much as you can. Also, this is a good time to decide on how your base will be structured. You will either go the expansionist route or the isolationist route. New players may be uncomfortable with all the gases and temperatures mixing and will try to lock themselves from the outside world. It's a valid strategy, but it takes a lot of resources and time. I think it's a better strategy to treat the whole asteroid as your home and let the gases flow freely. Then, allowing some chlorine and hydrogen and whatnot will not be such a problem, as there will be plenty of space for them to settle, and you can always deal with them later. Same with heat, I would rather set up a farm in a controlled environment of one insulated room rather than try and control the temperature of the whole base, just to keep several plants alive. At the beginning, you'll be able to subsist on the food you dig up, but don't postpone setting up farm tiles for too long, and they really don't take that many resources and dupe time. Just plant a few as soon as you can to prolong your muckroot reserves. Also, sweep the muckroot as soon as possible and set your food storage at a high priority, so you don't lose muckroot to the hatches. The muckroot could last you anywhere between 10 to 20 cycles with 3 or 4 dupes. After that, you might consider getting a farmer or rancher that doubles as supplier, operator, or a chef if you don't have any. Having chef in particular will allow you to use grill. Just set it to a higher priority and to perpetually make barbecue and cooked seafood. This way, whenever a creature dies, your dupes will promptly sweep up the meat and cook it. Just don't forget to restrict consumption of raw meats, or they'll promptly sweep them up and gob them up, and go on and open up the areas where pacus, sweetles, and other creatures live. By this time, you might already realize that the warning insufficient oxygen generation means nothing. As long as there's oxygen where it matters, and your dupes aren't running marathons just to take a breath, you're all good. Just check the gas overlay. And if you notice that there's too much carbon dioxide than you're comfortable with, the problem might be that vertical openings in your base are too narrow for gas to freely move, that you don't have a deep enough pit for CO2 to settle, or you do not have enough oxygen to push CO2 down. The former two are easily fixed, and the latter has several solutions. On Terrania asteroid, the viable ways of producing oxygen are using deodorizers with polluted oxygen, oxygen diffusers, and SPOMs. For new players, I recommend starting with oxygen diffusers or deodorizers and then transitioning to SPOM as soon as you can. Self-powering oxygen machine, SPOM, possibly the first thing that you'll have to look up a design for, is basically the thing that will provide you with oxygen until your very last breath. Hold on. SPOM is basically the thing that will provide you with oxygen forever if you set it right, and it's something you can build and forget. You can postpone it for 100 cycles if you haven't yet found a renewable source of water or any type of cool environment, and just survive on deodorizers or algae, but for me, setting up SPOM marks the transition to mid-game, so I will show it to you now and you decide when you're ready for it. So, it consists of 3 parts. Part 1 is prepping the input for the electrolyzer, some sort of sustainable geyser or vent, with steam or clean, polluted or salt water. Vents that erupt in steam require cooling, most often with a steam turbine setup like I have here. Since you're only at the start of the game, you might not yet have the means to tame a steam vent yet, and that's fine. What you can do instead is allow the steam to interact with the nature around it, and it will be enough to cool the steam into water for the time being. Just put down a liquid pump made of gold amalgam to prevent overheating, and lock the vent with insulated tiles on just one side, the side that's turned to your base. You'll have plenty of time before steam stops turning into water, but you have to get your hands on a steam turbine before it happens. And also don't open that thing up until you get an atmosuit. Having such a setup is akin to having a ticking time bomb, so try to see if you have geysers that erupt with brine instead, those will require desalination, or geysers that erupt with polluted water, those will require a water sieve. Those geysers are your best options for setting up SPOM in the early game. The oxygen will come out of the electrolyzers at a minimum 70 degrees Celsius or more if your water is hotter, but don't dwell on that for now. Heat won't be a problem for you for many cycles to come. And if you're unsure how to tame a particular geyser or event, just Google this. If you really can't find any vent with water at all, it's fine to use one of the several water pools you have, but in the long term I don't recommend you relying on a SPOM without a renewable water source. The second part of the SPOM is the room with electrolyzers and gas pumps that separate oxygen from hydrogen. There's multiple ways to achieve this, and I will leave links in the pinned comment to a few guides on SPOMs that will help you understand it all better. And finally, the third part is putting the hydrogen to good use and producing power from it to run all the machinery, which is what makes SPOM self-powered. Here, I am using a smart battery to connect the hydrogen generators, which prevents the generators from wasting hydrogen when the battery is charged. You will use this sort of setup to optimize it with all generators except manual. My battery is set to work between 3 and 97%. If you leave it at 0, there will be outages in your grid which can mess up quite a few things for you. Other than that, power generation is not rocket science. Remember to connect the heavy wires to a transformer before connecting to consumers. Refer to this helpful guide from the ONI Discord. And with this, both your water and oxygen problems should be solved, allowing you some breather before moving on to the next problem. Congratulations, you have reached mid-game. By this point you have decided on whether you'll be isolating from the world or treating it as your playground, explored the map and found multiple vents, have set up a sustainable water and oxygen solution, a plumbing loop, a little farm, and have explored the basic ways of making power. In the next episode we will look deeper into power solutions, dealing with liquids and gas, setting up industry to produce fiber, steel, refined metals, and atmosuits, talk about cooling, storage, food, venturing to oil biome to make petroleum and plastic, and much more. Click here to watch the mid-game progression guide, and don't forget to like and comment if this guide has been helpful to you.